So hello and welcome to the Everyday Farmers Conference. We're talking all about small ruminants and getting started with them. That's sheep and goat. Today we are talking about lambing and kidding, which is the actual process of the ewes and does actually having their babies. And so today we have three wonderful speakers. We have Jenna and Jordan Locke and Kate Johnson. And they're going to talk about all of their personal experiences dealing with having babies on their farms. So Jenna and Jordan, would you like to start with introducing yourselves?
Yeah, you bet. We're Jenna Jordan Locke. We've only been farming for a little over a year now. We decided to get into sheep just because of how much land we have out at our farm. Also the low investment costs it costs for us to get in. Yeah, we farm at Vanscoy, Saskatchewan, up here in Canada. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We're really new to this, so we're taking every chance we can to learn as much as we can and take little pieces of advice here and there from anybody and everybody, really.
Yeah. Our long-term plan is to have a working farm that we can eventually hopefully work on full-time. So we also have meat chickens and egg layers just as a side thing, but sheep are our biggest new venture.
Kate, go ahead.
All right, so I'm Kate Johnson, and I have a little farm in Longmont, Colorado, Briargate Farm, and we've been here on the farm for 15, almost 16 years, and we raise dairy goats, which we've done for the past 12 years. So I used to be in Jordan and your guys' position as being brand new to it, and it's amazing how quickly time goes by. At any rate, we raised the dairy goats. We started as a 4-H project for my kids, and then as my kids, aged out and I was pretty attached to the goats, I decided to keep on with it because I actually had parlayed the goats into a business. We opened a cheese making school. Because I started making cheese from the goat milk, and gradually that just became really popular. People wanted to learn. So about 6 years ago, we actually opened a cheese making school after teaching it kind of casually. And so that's really my full-time career now. And the goats are just kind of part of my side shtick. They make me more believable as a cheese making instructor, although not all of our cheeses are goat cheeses. We teach all species, including sheep milk, when we can find it, which is very hard to find in our neck of the woods. So that's my story.
Okay, great. Can you guys explain a little bit about like the numbers, like how many sheep you guys have? Maybe how many that have lambed this year or previously, kind of like for you, Kate, because you've done it for so long, you can kind of talk about average numbers. And then Jen and Jordan, you can talk about kind of what happened last year, this past time.
Yep.
So the last year was our first year doing it. We started out with 8 ewes and 1 ram, and we had about 1.5 lambs per ewe. So we ended up with 13 lambs. This year we're going to have 14 ewes lambing, and we ended up getting a backup ram just to make sure everything runs smoothly, but we're still expecting about 1.5 lambs per ewe, so we'll hopefully get 21 this year.
And are you at the point where you're expanding, or are you going to start selling them off?
So we're selling off the rams that we get each year, but keeping all the ewes that we have.
Okay.
So we keep about a dozen does, plus or minus, but not all of those are going to be kidding each year. Some of them are young does, or some are older, or some take a year off. So on average, we're doing about 4 or 5 does per year, so pretty small. And I think I counted up last night, we've had 54 kiddings and 101 babies in the last 12 years. So, yeah, so we're getting up there, have some experience. I'm also a 4-H leader, so I've helped at a lot of other kiddings because I help with my 4-H kids when they're needing a little extra hand. So I guess by now I've seen a lot, not everything. Every year there's a new surprise of something new I need to learn. But most of my does, I raise full-size Nubians. I used to also raise Nigerian dwarfs. And I think the most we ever had was quads. We had 4 with one of the dwarfs, which is not uncommon at all. And my Nubians typically have twins. We've had triplets a few times, and they do occasionally have singles. So, so let's see, this past year we had 10 kids, and that's pretty average. So usually we're in the 8 to 12 kids a year. And we sell most of them. That's the goal. But usually I don't quite, I always say I'm going to keep 1 each year, and then there's 4. And so.
And just so for the audience, because I know we're throwing out a lot of terms, a female sheep is a ewe, a female goat is a doe,
Yep.
a baby sheep is a lamb, the baby goats are kids, that's why it's lambing versus kidding.
Exactly.
And then there's the ram for the sheep. What's the male called for the goats?
A buck.
A buck.
Yes.
So if you guys get confused with like terms and stuff, that's kind of why they're like, Jen and Jordan will be talking about different things, but it's the same process, similar process. They're just different terms because it's goat versus sheep. So let's just get into the, like, right before you guys have the babies, do you guys do any prep work to like I know some people have like a pregnancy kit, like this is like for emergencies in case stuff happens. I know that some people do the jugs, which Kate, are they called jugs in goat land? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what, I mean, I don't know what a jug is. I mean,
Oh.
I do know what a jug is, but what are you referring to? What is jug?
The jug is like when the moms have had the babies and you separate the moms with the kids so that they don't get confused with other moms who are kidding or lambing.
Yeah, no, we don't have a term like that. I'm not even sure what the comparable would be for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think for at least for sheep, there's a tendency to steal. Moms will tend to steal babies.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that doesn't, I've never had that happen. Every now and then I will have some does that will co-parent. Usually it's because they're related. I had a mother-daughter that kidded at the same time, and they would just share parenting duties. But most of the time they're very specific. A doe won't let anybody else's kid nurse off of her. And typically they don't share at all.
But anyway, so prep work for you guys. Go ahead and just talk about kind of what you do to prepare for the babies.
Our biggest thing is that we make sure that our barn is all cleaned out and we have fresh bedding down in it. When you're dealing with newborns, everything is cleanliness, right? Everything, you're trying to keep everything as clean as possible. So clean bedding's a big one. We always make sure that we've got, iodine is a big one that we use. We dip their umbilical cords in that right after they're born, just to sterilize everything. Have towels and stuff like that on hand. Especially, if it's cold out and the mom isn't quite licking the newborn off quick enough, it's not a real big deal to wrap the lamb or up in a towel and dry it off a little bit first,
just to make sure it's not getting too cold, being wet. We've had some issues that led to that. We also like to have, this is kind of just having all of our supplies ready before lambing. We have water buckets and hay buckets available in each jug. So we did set up jugs for our sheep. We had a couple first-time ewes, so we just wanted to make sure that we could seclude them with the lamb and make sure that they were bonded. We didn't want to have the ewes just give birth and then run off.
And we even noticed in our lambing pens, our jugs, we had some gaps in the fence that were just big enough that the lambs could go through, and they when they get through with the other mom beside them, they're not, they're just looking for a teat to suck on. So they have no problem nursing off the mom beside them. And the mom doesn't care because she's just laying there, eating, drinking, doing her thing. She's not really paying attention to which lamb is feeding off of her. So yeah, we gotta, our lambing jugs aren't perfect by any means yet, but they do the trick.
Oh, Kate, somehow you got unmuted. You got muted.
Oh,
Sorry about that. All right. I was going to say, it's funny how they show you where the weak link is.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do have, I call it the birthing suite, where we put them. I do, because I'm doing so few, and because up until the pandemic, the farm was a big part of our attraction for our classes. My cheese making classroom is on the farm, and people like to come and see the baby goats. So I always spread out my kiddings when I'm planning so that they're not all bunched up together. So usually I'm going to have, 1 or 2 a month throughout the spring. So that doesn't always happen. This past year, somehow I had 4 in 1 week, and that's unusual. But we do have multiple stalls. I guess that's kind of similar to your jugs concept. But we have one big stall that's our kidding suite, and that's what I call it because it's the biggest one. And what I typically do, just like Jordan said, cleanliness is important. So we strip everything, and then usually I bed it with fresh straw. And this is sometimes we'll bed with wood shavings, but when it comes to kidding time, we try not to use the wood shavings because babies can inhale that fine dust, and that can be dangerous for them. So usually I clean that out and, really strip it and get it clean. And then when we know we're getting close, we like to separate the does who are going to have their babies and give them a friend so that they're not stressed out. So most, because they are herd animals, they don't really like to be alone. So usually we'll separate them with whoever they get along with best in the herd until they are actually in labor. And then we usually remove that doe because she just gets in the way. So that's a big part, is just getting the stalls ready. And then, like Jen said, making sure you've got your water buckets and your feed pans and anything you're going to need. And then we have a kidding kit that we kind of just make sure in the spring is stocked and has everything in it. Iodine being important, lots of towels, gloves, lubricant, because oftentimes you have to go in and help, and it makes it a lot easier with lubricant. Things like, we'll have a bottle ready because we want to make sure those babies get what they need if they can't nurse. We always have some colostrum replacer ready, and or some frozen actual colostrum, which is my preference, and a little nipple that the babies can eat from. And then one of our big things we do that maybe not everyone does is we always have molasses and warm water because that's just really a nice little treat for the doe after she is kidded. They will down a whole bucket of molasses water, and it helps kind of replenish their energy and get them hydrated for all the milk production they're just about to do. So those are some of the things we do to get ready.
And so, Kate, you mentioned that you kind of have scattered lambing throughout, kind of starting from when up into when.
So usually our first kidding is in March, typically. We have done it as early as February, but it can be pretty cold in Colorado in February. If I am going to do that early of a kidding, or if it just looks like, we can have snow in May. So, it doesn't really always pay to plan. So we will sometimes have warming lights ready, but I would prefer to just take those babies up to the house if it's that cold once they're on the ground, because lights scare me with the fire hazard. So we typically start in March. Now, March, April, May is typically our kidding months. Sometimes we'll go into June, and sometimes we'll start in February.
What about you, Jenna and Jordan? When did you guys end up lambing this year?
Well, we planned this last spring when we actually planned out our lambing season was we started in April. And
about middle of April.
Yeah, middle of April, and then right till we had our last lamb the first week of June, and that only because she must have been bred late, because she was that one last ewe was about a month later probably than all the other lambs had come. So yeah, she just must have gotten bred a little later. But what we had when we first bought our sheep last August of 2019, we had bought a small flock of sheep, and they were pregnant already, and we didn't know that they were pregnant. We knew that they were with a ram, but didn't know that they were pregnant, and that was kind of our fault for not picking up on that, I guess. Like,
we kind of had a feeling that they would be because they were with the ram. But at the time we were like, what could be the problem with winter lambing? Like, we can do it. It's no big deal. It'll be cute. And we quickly learned that we're never doing winter lambing.
Yeah, it's not
ideal for us to do.
No, well, even Kate, you down in Colorado, in January, you don't want to be having newborn sheep outside or newborn goats outside in January.
Yeah, although I do have to say our scariest kidding was in April when it was -9 degrees. So yeah, and they of course came that day. And I was out of town, and so it was my family here, and they were checking every 30 to 40 minutes, and they almost lost babies because they came in between that window. But so we've had 60-degree days in January, and we have blizzards in May. So, but on average, yes, generally March, April, May are a little better than January and February.
Yeah.
What's the lowest temperatures you guys get in the winter? Because like I'm from California, but I'm currently in Tennessee. So like cold temperatures, like for me is like in the single digits, maybe we'll get there. What about you guys? Like what is the coldest you get? Because that seems like a big determinant on when you lamb is the weather.
Oh, well, with the wind chill every day in January, it'll be -40.
Oh,
Celsius.
it's so cold.
I can't even imagine that.
I can't either.
Being a California girl, I'm like, that doesn't even register.
Yeah, I mean, if we get below 0, that's pretty cold here. So -8 or 10, and that's usually only going to be in the middle of the night. And most of the time, my does don't kid at night, which is fortunate. So that would, -40 would be really cold. That's cold even for a Coloradan, at least where I am.
So, because Kate, you do dairy and cheese. Jen and Jordan, what is your purpose for the sheep? Is it for meat or wool?
So we raise hair sheep. You can have wool sheep or hair sheep, and then they're primarily for meat. We chose hair sheep just because we were starting out. We didn't want to have to worry about having to shear the sheep, because for hair sheep, they just kind of rub against things to slough their hair off. And then, we just raise them for meat. We sell them about 5 months old when they're about 80 pounds.
Does that affect also when you guys choose to lamb? Because of, how like you guys, Jen and Jordan, you guys have to wait for, I'm assuming, a weight, like they have to be a certain weight before you sell them. And then, Kate, do you do it a little earlier for dairy so it's more throughout the summer? Just explain a little bit about, like, because you have a certain purpose for your sheep, does that affect how you plan?
Yeah, so since they do want to be about 5 months old when we sell them, April was kind of the latest we wanted to get going with lambing. We kind of found that was kind of our sweet spotting for timing, because we didn't want to go earlier than that, just because March can still be cold usually. And then any later than April is getting a little bit too late in the year to have them at the age where we want to sell them at the end. And
then be able to put our ram back in with the ewes in November. We want the lambs that were born in the spring already, and the lambs, like For example, our first time ewes that are going to be bred in November were born in early May. So right around that 6-7 month old range is when you can breed them for their first time. So it kind of all, you know, you got to plan it all out that way so that everything lines up just right.
And like we
Yes.
said, it depends on weather too, because like for us, we can lamb a little earlier because we don't get those really cold weather. But like for you guys have to worry about the cold with the babies. And Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if I was more serious about the milk production and those people around here who really are in it just for the milk, then we would probably be kidding in December and January. That's pretty common because you figure you're going to have about 2 to 3 months that you're not getting access to all the milk, because if you're feeding babies their mother's milk. And so that gives you a longer milking season. But I plan it really around, primarily just around my lifestyle and my schedule and my preferences. So, but I think it's also pretty common around here. Most of us that are more hobby farmers are doing it. You know, spring kidding is just traditional. So you think of spring, and although, you know, March and April are actually traditionally our snowiest months, they aren't consistently long periods of cold typically. And so that's usually when we're doing it. But really, so much of it for me is just personal preference. I like spreading it out. Some people like getting it all done at once. And then we are doing milk production as well. And our milking season goes till about, you know, November, December. Things start to change a lot with the milk in this area. And that fits my lifestyle pretty good. I'm milking, you know, roughly 9 months, 6 to 9 months of the year, and then you get a little break.
Okay, perfect. So let's get into the actual birthing part. Do you guys notice your ewes or your does, any signs that you know that they're getting close, or like, oh my gosh, it's going to be within a few, 24 hours or whatever? Just explain a little bit about like what to look for in the girls that they're like, oh, it's coming.
Yeah, the biggest thing, if you want to talk about how you know that it's definitely within the next 24 hours, is you notice that the mom is laying down a lot. You know, you can tell she's getting restless and uncomfortable. She'll get up, walk around, take 5 steps, and then, you know, kind of do a little circle, lay back down, adjust, and she'll only lay there for 2 or 3 minutes and then get up again. Yeah, that's how you know that they're coming right away. Other signs, you know, in the days leading up to it are their vulva will be really red. Their back end will be really high because you can tell the lamb has moved back in the birth canal a little bit. Yeah, things like that. Their bags will drop too. Their milk bag will drop. And that's kind of a hard determining factor as to when the birth will actually take place, because we've had a couple where the ewe will drop her milk bag the day before she has the lamb, and then we'll have others where, you know, the month before she has the lamb, her bag's already big and full. So that's not, you know, I would say that's probably the least reliable way to really determine.
For us anyway.
For us anyway, don't get me wrong, everybody's a little bit different. You know, maybe once we've been doing this for a few more years, we'll be able to use that as a little bit more of a determining factor. But in terms of you know, the last 12 to 24 hours before the birth, it's how restless the mom is.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of ours are pretty similar to that. I often say, you know, there's the classic generalization of what should happen and what you should look at, and then there's always exceptions to that rule. But I would say most of the time, it's a combination of physical and behavioral changes. Excuse me. It's my morning frog. So yeah, and you know, there are surprises. Like I've had some does that just, you know, they come a day or two early, that you checked on them 5 minutes ago, you all of a sudden are sitting on the deck and you hear babies. You're like, oh, they're here, you know, but that's unusual. That's kind of the exception. Most of the time it's a lot like what Jordan was saying. There's some restlessness, there's up and down, but one of the biggest indicators for me behaviorally is they'll separate themselves from the herd. So you'll find them somewhere they normally aren't. You know, the herd's out and they're in, standing in the barn. I mean, that's classic, like, okay, we're ready, we're gonna watch now. But, and then there are physical changes too. And one of the big things we look for in physical change is, we call it they've dropped. So they'll be holding that baby really high and they look really fat. And then all of a sudden they don't look as fat. And they're along their top line, you can see their hip bones, and then right around their tail head, you'll notice a little indentation where the ligaments have gone soft. We call it they've lost their ligaments. So right around the tail head, you'll kind of feel it, and it's just completely squishy. Whereas, you know, maybe a few hours earlier or the day before, it was pretty firm. And so that's a pretty classic sign. Once we see that they've dropped and they've hollowed out on top, we're pretty sure today's the day. And then when you couple that with some behavioral things as well, but there are always exceptions to that. The bagging up is another thing. You know, a doe that's a first freshener may not have, and freshening is what we call it when they come into milk. I don't know if that's the same term in sheep, but the first year they may or may not have gotten any milk yet. And then you may have a doe that's kidded multiple times and she'll have a huge udder, you know, for days before she kids. And then you'll have others that have kidded many times and their milk comes in a week after they've kidded. So there's just so much variability that you have to just always be prepared. We do hand breed our does, so we know very close to when their due date is, and we know the signs to be watching for, but we've still had a few surprises where you just had no indication at all. They just knock them out.
Well, and in addition to that, through some conversations that I've had, is that sheep are harder to predict, like timing wise, because it's not always obvious when they're breeding. So, and then, but Kate, you said that goats, it's a lot more obvious.
Well, it is the way we breed. So, you know, I know, like you said, you put your ewes with the rams and then it's kind of like, have at it. And we pretty much track heat cycles, and then we're taking the doe to the buck. We only leave them there for like literally 15 or 20 minutes. We watch, we know it's happened. We come back, we have a due date now, right? And then we're watching, you know, 3 weeks later to see if they cycle again. Because, you know, sometimes you'll miss that. So we usually do run a blood test too, because we're testing for some other things as well. So we're pretty darn sure what that due date is. And I find it's generally plus or minus, you know, 2 or 3 days on each side. But over the years, I've kind of tracked what's typical. And for my does, you know, 152 days is my typical gestation. So, but there are exceptions, of course. You have to always be ready and be vigilant.
So for you guys, can you guys talk about what, like, either the perfect or what normal lambing looks like on your end as a farmer? Like, you know, how closely do you watch them? What's your kind of routine when things are going great? And then also talk about when things are not going great, kind of when you guys choose to step in, you know, what's your process for doing that? So talk about like your perfect, this is what should be happening, and then talk about the moments.
Yeah, I'll bring up the perfect thing that kind of happened for us this year, and it was nice being you know, our first real lambing season was I got to kind of give a shout out to COVID because Jenna and I we weren't full time yet, so we were both laid off. So it was nice because we were able to be home all day, every day, right when lambing season started, which was awesome because like even we talked about this yesterday, how next year we're each, you know, week after one another. We're probably going to have to take a week each of holidays from work just to kind of line it up. And that's, I guess part of, starting a farm. And so, yeah, it was perfect because we got to be there and watch everything and really keep an eye on the sheep. Whereas in an unperfect scenario, you don't get to do that.
Well, just our imperfect scenario was winter lambing. We were working during the times that they were lambing in winter. So we would come home from work and there would be a couple lambs, or we would wake up in the morning. Well, and it was surprise. We didn't know how far along they were. So we ended up having some lambs December 27th and had no idea that they were coming then. So we kind of went out in the morning to check on them, and there were triplet lambs. So that was definitely imperfect. We weren't there to help them if that you needed help, and they were in the middle of winter, so they were risking hypothermia. So
that's an imperfect scenario.
Yeah.
The nice thing was, again, when we were off, we were able to watch the lambs. So there was, I think we had 3 ewes that we ended up having to step in and give them a hand and had to pull the lambs. It was nice because, we were able to sit there with them and watch them, give them, 20 minutes, half an hour, if there wasn't really much movement of the lamb coming out. Then we kind of knew, okay, we have to step in and give this ewe a little bit of help, especially because we have a pretty young flock yet, where lots of our ewes are lambing for the first time. So it's not uncommon, I'm sure, in sheep and goats that a first-time mom may need a little bit more help, just because she hasn't done it before.
Yeah, so I would say, some people would say the perfect scenario would be that you come out and there's 2 kids on the ground dry and nursing. But for me, that's like a really big disappointment because I really love the excitement of kidding, and I like being there and, watching and assisting. So for me, and I would say about 50% of the time, this is kind of classic how it will go. You're pretty close to your due date. You're watching that doe. She's been acting totally great up until the day before. And then she starts to, she drops and she starts getting that distant look in her eye. We call it going into the zone. And when we know we're getting close, they're holding up the wall is what we call it. They're standing against the wall with their forehead against the wall. And you're really close. And then you start to see the classic discharge, and you've got everybody prepared and everything separate. And then, within an hour or so of that long stringy discharge, they lay down and start pushing, and within 5 minutes, babies are coming out. That's the perfect scenario, and they are coming out the right way, and they don't need your help. And then mama cleans them up and they get up and nurse. That's really your perfect scenario. And I'd say 50% of the time, that's about how it goes. So that leaves about 50% of the time it doesn't quite go like that. And, some of the things that we're looking for is, let's say the doe has dropped and she's showing all those classic signs, and then hours and hours and a whole day goes by and nothing has progressed. I actually had 2 that happened like that this year, one at my farm and one at one of my students' farms. And that was where, babies just were not in the right position and labor just couldn't start. They were ready and labor didn't start. And so when you've kind of seen that everything's lining up just the way it should and then just nothing happens, you're probably going to have to go in and do some repositioning. And while you're in there, you might as well pull the baby out. But then they have another really common scenario where everything's lining up pretty well, but you get to the pushing stage and then they're just pushing and no progress. So we have something we kind of call the 30-30-30 rule, which is every 30 minutes we should be seeing progress. So, if they're laying down and they've laid down for 30 minutes and they look like they're about to start pushing, but pushing never starts, then you know you probably got to go in and intervene. Or if pushing has started, but after 30 minutes of pushing, you don't see any sign of progress. There's no feet, no nose, no nothing. Probably got to go in. Or they've pushed for 30 minutes and the baby, you can see it, but it hasn't moved for 30 minutes. So we kind of, we often say, you know, keep a little pad of paper and, you know, keep track of when that time starts, because you can really lose a sense of time when you're in the adrenaline rush moment. But we kind of use that as give her 30 minutes, unless she's obviously really distressed, to work it out. But if it isn't resolving, then you're going to have to go in and assist. So that's generally how it works. And that's up until kids are born. And then there's a whole nother set of things that should be perfect that aren't always perfect once the kids are on the ground.
So when you
I like
say
that
going,
30,
oh,
30,
go ahead.
30. No, I really like that 30-30-30 thing. That's something that Jenna and I will have to adopt, because that sounds like a heck of a strategy.
Yeah, it really helps. We teach a lot of 4-H workshops on it, and it's good, you know, especially when you're new at it. It's really easy to just jump the gun or to wait too long, right? It's because you just don't know, like, what should I be using as my guide. So having this kind of rule of thumb is just really reassuring, just to say, well, it's only been 15 minutes. Let's give her a little more time. And when a 4-H kid calls me and says, oh my gosh, you know, something's happening with labor, I'll ask that, like, okay, when did she start pushing and how long has it been? You know, so keeping track of that time is really helpful. It helps you know when you do need to call for assistance too. And that's another thing I would say, especially when you're new at it. But even now at 12 years, I still like to know I've got some resource out there if we get into trouble. So if you're new at it, you know, who is your vet? Do you already have a relationship with the vet? Do they know who you are and where you are? Because if you're in an emergency, can you call them? And sometimes I will just check in. We have a couple vets in the area, and I'll just find out, like, are you around this week if I need you? And then I have a couple of other more seasoned goat owners in the area that also will help in an emergency. And I just like to kind of have a little check-in, you know, when labor looks like it's starting, hey, we're in labor, I think everything's gonna be fine, but are you around just in case? So, you know, that can be really reassuring too, because sometimes you just need to talk to somebody on the phone. You don't need somebody to come out. You just need somebody, you know, that knows maybe a little more than you do, or a fresh perspective to say, okay, here's what you could try, or whatnot.
So when you're talking about helping, from my understanding, a lot of it is just like going up in them and feeling out where the baby is, making sure that it's coming out the right way, which is mostly like nose and hands or feet, right? Like feet's not preferred, but if that's where they are, the feet will come out first. Sometimes their bums will get stuck.
Yes.
And I think especially if there's more than one baby, that kind of they can get all tangled up and it becomes a little harder. So when you say like going in and help, is that just going in and just adjusting and then pulling, or is there anything else you do?
So for me, it depends a little bit where we are. So if I can't see any kids yet, in the case of where everything's been lining up that we should be in labor by now, but you see nothing, some of that going in may even be just helping her open up. Sometimes it's just, you know, a good lubricated hand and just rubbing around that area to help it just open up. It can get everything started. You know, like sometimes that's all I need to do. I don't even need to go all the way in. She just hasn't opened up yet and she needs that help. But going in typically, if I can't see anything, is going to be just to see, can I even find a kid? I mean, how far up are they in there? And then sometimes it's, you know, I can see she's open and there's a sack, but no kid. And then you're going in, like you said, to feel body parts, like, and you're right, if it's the bum or the back of the neck, I mean, those are the two things you don't want to have, you don't want to feel when you get in there. If you feel, you know, a nose, a foot, you know, probably okay. But if you just feel something hard and solid and you can't find a mouth, you know, then they're probably not coming out on their own. You're going to have to reposition them. Sometimes it's pushing them back in, you know, and that seems counterintuitive, but you got to push them back in order to be able to get them to straighten out. And then sometimes you've got a kid already coming out. I had a really interesting one a couple years ago where everything looked great. I had feet coming out, and then the feet just kept coming out, and then pretty soon more feet were coming out. And you're like, that is not the same goat. And so you've got two kids, you know, with front feet coming out at the same time. It's never going to happen. So you're going to have to push one of them back in and figure out whose feet goes with which head. And, you know, that can be difficult when you've got, you know, a doe that's not super happy about you being in there, especially if you have little, you know, when we used to raise Nigerian dwarfs, it's sometimes hard getting a hand in there, and let alone to feel and reposition anything, which is one reason I really like the bigger does. So yeah, that can be a little scary, I think, if you're new at it. And then one little trick I'll teach you that I learned from that weird one with all the hands, I mean, all the feet coming out, is sometimes to figure out what's going on in there. When you do get your hand in there, closing your eyes. I know that sounds weird, but if you close your eyes as you're in there and then you try to envision the anatomy, it's so much easier than when your eyes are open and you have all this interference. You can kind of envision, like, okay, you're trying to find a head and work your way down the side of the head and figure out which legs go with that head. And a friend of me actually talked me through that really difficult labor. And that was one of the things she said. And as soon as I did it, I could figure out what was going on in there. So just a little tip.
When I've also heard or just done some research about sometimes depending on how much you're feeding your ewes or your does, that can create larger babies, and that causes problems too, because they do get stuck because they're bigger. A lot of times if you have a whole herd or a flock and you know that they're all pregnant, at least we haven't done any lambing. That's going to be next year, but we do have dairy, a dairy breed that is commonly has 2+. And so like you have to feed them nutrition wise for all of the babies that they're having. And so sometimes you feed your whole flock for 2 babies because you just know that naturally they have to. But if one of them doesn't have to and only has 1, they're still eating the same amount for 2, which causes larger babies, and that causes them to get stuck. So like nutrition is a big thing too, but it's also hard to tell unless you have someone come out and do like an ultrasound to absolutely make sure how many, like, okay, this group is the ones that have only singles, so they need to be over here because they're fed this way. You know, that's like the perfect scenario when you can separate them like that. But like most of the time they're all jumbled in together. And so one ewe who has 3, or, you know, I don't know, do kids go up to 3?
Oh yeah, you can have, we can have 5 or 6.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So it's
and
like
one doe could have a single one year and have quads the next year. So we don't have a really good indicator. For us, it's more gestationally that we look at. We really I try to never let them go more than 4 or 5 days past their due date, because those final days is when you're going to have so much more growth. And so we'll induce labor or go in and pull babies by the time we get to that far past the due date, which is another advantage of knowing exactly when the breeding date was.
Yeah.
So when you induce, is that an injection?
Yeah, it's a series of a couple of injections. And then, you know, timing wise too, like, cause it's not immediate. So it's, you know, 24 to 36 hours afterwards. And usually that's something that we can do on our own. If you know you're going to have a really problematic birth, for instance, I have a much older doe now and I'm not breeding her anymore. But if she were to, let's just say she accidentally got bred, because that happens sometimes, I would probably induce her labor up at our vet school, because then if there were serious complications or she needed a C-section, she would just be there. And so I do know some breeders that will do that with high risk pregnancies where it's a doe that has had some kidding issues. And so we're going to just plan for, it's kind of like a planned C-section, right? For humans. And you can do that with your animals too.
Now, how much of that is genetic and that you want to breed out of your, like if you have a ewe or a doe that just like every season seems to be struggling, like that's something you try to breed out of your guys's flocks and herds, correct?
Yeah, generally it's hard in sheep, like, you know, and we're just getting into it. So we will deal with, you know, if there's a ewe that maybe is having problems lambing each year, or, you know, if she's just consistently throwing singles, you know, once your flock grows, those are probably traits that you would, you would maybe get rid of that ewe. You don't want to have stuff like that anymore. We've got one ewe, our oldest ewe, Esther, and she had
We think
what's it called? Oh, mastitis.
We think she must have had mastitis at the old farm she was at, and it wasn't maybe necessarily properly dealt with. So she's got kind of scar tissue built up in the udder, and didn't know exactly how her udder was going to work when she had her lambs, and she ended up having two really nice sized twin or round lambs, and it was then that we found out that nothing was coming out of her udder. So we kind of debated back and forth whether or not we would keep her because she gave us two really good lambs, but then we had to bottle feed them. And ultimately we've decided that we'll give her one more year just because we love her. And she did give us two really good lambs, so we kind of balance it out that way where sure we have to bottle feed them, but hopefully they'll produce more for us in the future, especially if they are ewes. So
yeah, if she could give us two really nice ewe lambs that we could add to our flock, then I wouldn't be opposed to bottle feeding her lambs. But yeah, stuff like that, you know, we have a mentor that we deal with. She wouldn't keep Esther. She would have gotten rid of her, you know, as soon as she found out that she had mastitis and wasn't able to feed her lambs. And you know, we'll probably get to a point like that too. But right now, like Jenna said, we really like her. She's kind of the mom of our flock, and yeah, throws really nice lambs, so that's good. And yeah, really nice sized lambs, and we don't mind bottle feeding. You know, we're at that point yet. We're young. We don't mind running out to the barn with a bottle, and the lambs get so attached to you. They love you, so you know, we don't hate that by any means.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, you do what works for you. There's not a hard and fast rule. But I would say what you were saying, Delaney, is right. Like, you want good, healthy stock to begin with. I mean, that's for all reasons, right? So, you know, knowing that you've got does or ewes that are from good breeding stock. But so there are some things that may be genetic, you know, maybe it's size, shape, disposition, and it could be about how they kid, but it could also be, like you said, whether they're freshening with mastitis, and that can be a trend that you can see. You know, if they do it once, they're probably going to do it again, and so on. But sometimes what happens is there are things that happen along the way that had nothing to do with genetics, but it has to do with just either aging or problems that have just developed. For instance, scar tissue, you know, from a really difficult labor may mean that any going forward future, you know, labors are going to be difficult for that doe, but her genetic line is really good and you really want to keep her going. And that might be a high risk pregnancy that doe is really worth keeping, but you're going to have to take some precautions. And then you also have aging, you know, aging kind of changes things. And then one of the things that I think I have found is time off, especially as they're aging, isn't a good thing. So, you know, as those does get older, they really need to be kidding every year. Maybe they can have a year off, But once I've had a doe that had more than a year off, I'd say if she's over, 6 years old, 5 or 6, she's probably done, because it becomes too high risk to me. Everything seizes up, kind of locks up. And then you do have, I did have a little Nigerian dwarf doe that happened. She had a difficult kidding. We let her try one more year. And that difficult one was after having a few years off, and she was getting older. She had one difficult one. We tried one more time. It was another. She just was so locked up. We just retired her for good. She was the most wonderful doe, wonderful mother. She had years left in her, but I wasn't going to put her through that again. So that was a function of just age and use. So like I have an older doe this year that didn't get pregnant last year. And if she doesn't get pregnant this year, she's retired, because it just starts to get too hard on them as they get older. It's really easier if you breed them every year until they get to a certain age, or until they have a problem, and then just let them retire.
Hey, why do you let some of those does take a whole year off?
Out of curiosity.
Sometimes it's not on purpose. So some of that is because I'm trying to, like with this particular doe, I was trying to spread out my breeding season, and I wanted to have her kid a little bit later in the season. And the problem is we stopped cycling, like the does stopped cycling about January or so. Yep. And so I did breed her, but I bred her late, and then she didn't settle because it starts getting a little harder for them to settle as they get older. And then I missed it. Like, she didn't go back in heat again. There wasn't an opportunity to breed her again.
Because I know, like same with you, if you have a 152-day pregnancy, you could, I don't know if you do it. We personally don't, but we know some people will breed they'll get two breeding cycles in a year.
Yeah, and I typically don't do that. You could do it with like some people will have kids year round by inducing heat in some of your herd, so that you're breeding at a time we don't typically breed, by inducing. But I feel like it's just hard on a doe, I think, to do 2 in a year. And also, that's a lot of kids to manage. Like I'm trying to keep my herd numbers manageable, and I love the kidding process, but I want to find good homes for everybody. And there's only so much of a market. So I typically don't want to push it too much more than that. But everybody does that differently, right? And you do want to think about like your lifestyle and what works for you and what your goals are as you're planning that.
Yeah.
So a year break, would that include like a miscarriage, or is a miscarriage still technically considered we did breed her, it just didn't go to?
It depends on how far, when that, a miscarriage early in the cycle I wouldn't consider that. I would consider that a year off, because it's mostly like as they get older, if they don't go through the full birthing thing, then a lot of those joints and things just tend to lock up. They just get tighter and more locked. So now I did have a doe one time that kidded prematurely, and she lost the babies. The only time that's ever happened to us, they were like a month early. And so I think it was just one baby. And so that I kind of considered, okay, she had her kid this year. And so I didn't really consider that a year off.
Okay, great. So let's move into like milk. Just immediately post, because I want to talk a little bit about colostrum and why it's important and stuff. But we talked about, so once the kids and the lambs are out, mom will eat the afterbirth and clean up the babies. And then do you guys go in and I know that some people will pull the udders just to make sure there's not, I don't know what it's called, but it gets like, sometimes the milk will get stuck because it's like plugged. So people will go in and kind of pump twice just to make sure that there's milk coming out for the babies to go in. Do you guys do that?
Yeah, we call it stripping the teat. And it's just because there'll be like a little waxy plug right at the end of the nipple. So you just squeeze the teat a couple times, push that out. We don't do that on every ewe because a lot of times, you know, if the lamb is really feisty and really wants that milk, then that lamb's going to go at it for, you know, 10 or 15 seconds and strip that teat on its own. But, you know, if we are having to help that ewe lamb anyway, Jenna and I have a really good process where, you know, we've agreed that if a ewe needs help, she'll kind of hold the ewe against the wall while I go in and grab the lamb. And so while we're doing that, Jenna will reach down and strip the teat just so once the lamb comes out and is ready to eat, it can start eating as soon as it wants.
We just, a reason we would strip the teat is we want to make sure that milk is coming out, because sometimes it's hard to tell if the lamb starts sucking.
If they're really getting milk or
yeah,
not.
we don't know if they're getting anything. So even if they've already stripped it, we'll just make sure that milk is coming out, and just so that we know that there is a chance to get that colostrum, which is important.
It's vital. They need colostrum. Without it, like you're gonna have issues with that lamb if you don't get colostrum to it right away.
Yeah, that's for sure. So the first thing you said, Delaney, about the afterbirth, what we typically do, we do not like our does to eat the afterbirth. It's, although they will do that in nature, they're doing that in nature primarily to hide the evidence from predators coming in. The placenta is actually filled with all kinds of toxic, pretty gross stuff. And also it's a choking hazard. So now sometimes we're just not there when all this happens and you come in and everything's cleaned up. And, you know, typically that's fine, but we typically try to monitor the afterbirth and watch for it and clean it up when it's out. Now the licking of the babies, yes, we would really like mamas to clean up their own babies. Some of them just have no interest in doing that. I have a few moms that just aren't that great of moms. And then I have some that are licking everything, including me and the barn wall. So it just depends on the mom. But yes, colostrum is vital. That's that initial nutrition. And we have a little rule of thumb, 6 ounces in 6 hours. That's kind of our rule of thumb. They've got to have that amount in order to survive. And so we got caught a little blindsided a few years ago by, you know, a kid that was up and nursing and looking great. And then it turned out he wasn't actually getting anything. And it wasn't because the mom didn't have colostrum. It was he just didn't have a strong enough suck response in the size and shape of her teat. So he was kind of on there looking like he was nursing, but he was kind of doing this instead of a closed mouth thing. And we lost that kid because he didn't get the colostrum he needed in the first few hours. And so ever since then, I've been a little bit more maybe proactive. So not only am I kind of stripping that udder and making sure the colostrum's in there, I'm making sure it's getting in that baby. So even if my babies are up and nursing and looking like they're doing great, I will have a little bottle. So I just brought it to show you. I keep these little pop bottles and a Pritchard nipple. And I keep these on hand in my kidding kit. And if everything's going great and mom looks like she's got plenty of colostrum, I'm just going to squirt some of that colostrum into the bottle, get a couple ounces, put the Pritchard nipple on, and get that into my baby. And then I can see that it went out of the bottle into the baby. And once I've seen that and I can see like, okay, you've gotten some, I can see you've got a good suck response. I know she's got the colostrum, then I can rest a little bit easier. The other thing that I'll do is check babies a few hours after birth and just feel their bellies. And you should feel like you've got a water balloon in there. You know, that's a sign that they're filling up with that mother's milk. And if you've got a really hollow, you know, tummy at that point, even though they're up and they're working on it, they're probably not getting what they need. And I would rather risk having a bottle baby because I've interfered than having a dead baby. And so I am very aggressive about that first few hours of making sure that colostrum's in there. We have so few kids and they are so precious to us that I would rather, you know, just not take that chance.
Yeah.
I know
See,
some farms have like actually tubed the colostrum in just so that they know. I think that's in more like severe, not severe, but more like intense dairy farms will do that just because they just want to make sure and have
Yeah.
that box ticked that it got in.
Yeah, I think tubing's a little risky because you do if you don't really get that right, you can cause pneumonia if you've hit it kind of wrong. But I have had kids. I mean, the other part is sometimes you do have a kid that isn't strong enough to get up and nurse on its own, and you have to intervene. You're going to get that colostrum in them one way or the other. I had a kid one year, I fed medicine droppers full of colostrum for 6 hours. Nonstop, a drip at a time, and she lived, but she wouldn't have without that. And she's actually one of my best does now and had absolutely no problem, with her own milk and feeding her babies. But for whatever reason, she just came out, she had a tough birth experience, or she was early or something, had no suck reflex at all. And then you need to be there and get it in there.
yeah, Jenna and I will, especially if there's multiple lambs, we always, you want to hand me that bottle? No, yeah, that one. Yeah, we use the exact same little nipple that Kate does. These ones are the best.
Yes.
And they're awesome because they like Kate said, they'll fit on a pop bottle. So if you don't have like your normal milking bottle around,
Right.
Pop bottle works just as good. And we've gone as far because colostrum is so vital that we've gone as far as, if there's multiples and one of them is sucking on the mom, we will pick the other one up and try and give it some colostrum out of the bottle, while the other one is sucking, just because we, like Kate said, you would rather risk having a bottle baby than having a dead lamb.
Yeah. And one little tip for anybody that's new to this, when these first come, you have to cut off the tip.
Yeah.
So if you didn't realize that, they're not getting anything if you don't cut off that tip.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, part of what you should have in your kidding kit is some kind of colostrum, because you don't have a lot of time. Sometimes that doe, either the kids came early or for whatever reason, she's just not coming into milk. And I've seen that happen before, even with subsequent fresheners. They were, abundant milk last year. They kid this year, and there is nothing there for a few days. And you can't really mess around waiting. So you either want to have, the dry colostrum replacer, which is second best. Best is if you have a doe that is producing a ton of colostrum, that's what this is. You're going to, she's got more than enough for her babies this year. Take anything extra and freeze it, because this is much better for those babies than the replacer. And so I always try to have both of those things on hand, and I have had to use those, if not for me, for one of my 4-H kids or, somebody else's. And the colostrum replacer needs to be colostrum replacer, not milk replacer. So you have to, and in fact, this is the only replacer I will use. I won't use milk replacer. If the milk doesn't come in, we're going to grocery store milk. I feel like it's much more economical, but it's also, I think, much better for them. But the colostrum replacer, you would use if that's all you've got.
And you feed it to them warm?
Yeah.
I like your tip about using or milking the colostrum out and saving that, because we've never even really considered that, but that makes a lot of sense, that if one is producing way more than it needs, why not?
Oh yeah, I have a couple of does that are such big producers that really would just go to waste, because their babies aren't going to nearly need that much. And especially if that doe only has one, and she's probably going to be producing way more than enough. And sometimes I'll get, I might get 3 of these little pop bottles full from one doe while she's feeding her other kid. Now you want to be careful you don't take, all of it, but you can pretty well tell what that baby's belly can hold, and you can take whatever's left.
And so colostrum is only produced within the first 24 hours of lambing and kidding, correct?
Yeah, and my understanding is the kids can only really absorb it appropriately in really the first 12 hours.
Yeah.
So your window's pretty small. And like I said, I use 6 hours as my, it's got to use 6 ounces in 6 hours. And really preferably I want to make sure it's 2 ounces in 2 hours, you know, I mean, just as soon as you can get it in there.
Can you explain what the different, what it looks like the difference in, like if someone was new and pulled it, like how do they know the difference between if it's colostrum or if they've already gone to the milk process?
It's very, very thick, at least for goats, very thick and very yellow.
Yeah.
So the milk is going to get much thinner and more white as it transitions to just milk. So that colostrum is really a dark, you know, golden color.
Yeah, Kate, you might know this, you know, more than us because, you know, we can definitely tell the difference in the colostrum and the milk, but I think the colostrum's got a lot of fat in it. Is that why it's got that yellowy, you know?
Yeah,
thick-
it's a lot of fat, but also just a whole lot of different nutrients in it that aren't in the later milk. So a lot of the antibodies and a lot of, but I think it is the high butter fat as well.
Yeah.
So we're talking a little bit about babies and how beautiful they are, but I know that there is the dark side of it too, to where some of the babies don't survive, or sometimes the ewes or the does have such a traumatic labor that they don't survive. Jen and Jordan, I don't know if this is if you've lost a ewe or any kids, but can you talk a little bit about if you guys have, and like what do you do when that happens?
So we've been really lucky that we haven't lost an ewe yet. Knock on wood, it never happens, but I know that's unrealistic. We have lost a few lambs. We attribute that mainly to winter lambing and just the cold temperatures. The triplets, we lost one due to just underweight. Right when we found them, the one was just half the size of the other two. And it just, I guess, the mom just couldn't give it the nutrients it needed during pregnancy. And so it didn't last very long, and there wasn't really much we could do, even though we tried giving it colostrum and stuff. Yeah.
Other than that, we are pros with lambs dying.
It's not funny.
It's
but
not funny. It just, we do attribute it mostly to winter lambing, and that's like we had, I think when we bought our first little flock and most of them were pregnant, I think we had 7 or 6 of them that every single lamb we had in the winter, not one of them survived. It was a combination of pneumonia, just being outside in the cold all the time. Yeah, and then you know what? A few of them were other health issues that hard to say if they were attributed to the cold or not. But luckily, during our planned spring lambing this year, we only had one that we lost, and that's because she had some health issues right from the get-go, and so we were lucky and thankful that once we figured out when we were supposed to lamb, everything went so much more smooth.
Yeah, that's definitely something. If any new farmers getting into it wanted to know our biggest piece of advice, it would be, if you don't have the facility to do winter lambing, try to avoid it, because especially where we live, it's just way too cold. The nice thing is we've learned a lesson from every death. You kind of have to in order to prevent them from happening in the future. The one lamb, we believe it had a selenium deficiency, and being newbies, we didn't really know what that looked like and stuff. So now, as soon as they're born, we give them all selenium vaccine just to make sure that they are for sure getting their selenium. And we've noticed a difference in the herd health because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, just avoid winter lambing if you can.
Yeah, so we've been pretty lucky. I think it goes to like Jen and Jordan said, you know, planning, be ready and be there. I mean, that makes a big difference. So in 12 years, we've had about 95% live births and success, which is pretty good. So we've had 3 stillborns in 12 years. And we've lost 2 kids post-birth. One was within hours, and one was the one that didn't get the colostrum, and we didn't realize he wasn't getting it. So what do we do with them? Well, for the babies, we do have a little baby graveyard. And so we do bury them on our property, and it just, makes us feel a little bit more like it meant something, and not just throwing them away or something, We also have been very, very fortunate to have never lost a doe in childbirth. In the years we've been doing this, we've only had one doe die, and we put her down. She was our original doe. And when she got old and really just was struggling and not doing well, we put her down, and we had actually just buried a horse that we had put down. So we had kind of a fresh hole in the back pasture, and we buried her out there. We did have one yearling that just up and died. And when that happens, we really want to know what happened. So in that case, we took her up to the vet school for a necropsy so that we could figure out what happened and try to then prevent it, from happening to other does. In her case, it was a combination of some things that are always prevalent in a herd, a little coccidia, a little clostridium overgrowth. And, you'll have a weak link in your herd, and she was the one. So I don't know what we're going to do if we have a doe die in child, but that's a big animal to try to bury on your property typically. And so we do have, this gets a little bit, sad to talk about, but since we do horses too, this has been an issue there too. There's a profession called a renderer, right? It's a person that will come and collect dead animals. I feel like that's so impersonal. I hate having to go that route. So since we do have a vet school nearby, I would probably be more likely to want to just take the dead body up there and donate it to the vet school for research, because at least then I feel like there's a purpose to it. And usually, they will do that. Our vet school is within an hour of our farm. So, but my herd's getting older. I'm going to be burying a few. I have a few wethers, which are castrated males. I think I have like a 10, 11, 12, and 13-year-old wethers. And so I know we're going to be dealing with some of this in the coming years. And I think it's an important thing to think about and plan for, because you really just don't want to be caught in that moment of where you're already kind of upset because you've lost an animal, and now you've got this thing you got to figure out, what in the heck am I going to do? So I think your question is good, Delaney, to think about what you're going to do and what your plan is, and have a plan. Because they don't live forever. They're all going to die eventually, right? So, and because we raise horses, that's also, we're down to just 2 horses now, but we've had to do some, some emergency things, but we've also done some planned things, and that's definitely a thing you can't just bury in your backyard.
Yeah. Well, and we've had some of our mentors, because like I said earlier, our flock is pretty young yet. So we don't really have, we're not really worried about seeing any of our ewes or anybody die of old age. I don't know if it's an option for you, Kate, but up where we are, like when there's auctions, they will take the older ewes just as cull. And so I don't know if that's an option. I know one of our mentors she has some older ewes, and at some point she'll put them on the truck just as cull. You don't get as much money for them, but you still get money out of an animal that really doesn't serve you any good anymore. So that's kind of a nice way. You don't have to see them die. You still get a little bit of money out of them before on their way out. I don't know if that's an option for you, but
yeah, I'm sure there are goat breeders that would do that, but we're such a small hobby farm. Like, really, our goats that would be to me like the equivalent of putting your dog on somebody's truck to, really, we would much rather be here with them at the end and sit with them, as we have them peacefully put down. I could never, by the time I've been through multiple births with a doe and I've hand milked her for all those years, I could never send her off. they have earned their place here and they've earned that dignified end. But that's not to say that if you had different goals for your farm and you had different financial needs, that wouldn't be a really good viable option. I'm lucky enough that I can treat them a little bit more like people might treat their pets, but within reason. You know, you do sometimes make some hard calls, but I'm typically going to make it harder on me than I'm going to make it harder on the doe.
That's fair. I can totally understand that. And we're at the point where we're still fresh. So we don't really know how we'll handle like ewes that will have to be put down. But it is definitely something that we have to think about and what we want to do. And it's just one of those hard decisions that you have to figure out what you're going to do ahead of time.
It
That's like,
is.
yeah. Our one ram, Wayne, I don't know. He's getting up there in age, I think. Like when we bought him, I think he was a little older. But I don't know how I'm going to let that guy go because he's my boy. I love hanging out with him every day.
Yeah,
So
and I think right. I think that's part of it too, is like there's just going to be certain ones, like your Esther, for instance. You know, you're probably not putting Esther on a truck and sending her off to auction. But, you know, and goats and sheep also do have really different personalities. I mean, a lot of people will say that goats just are far more personable than most sheep. But then you have sheep like Esther that you love, and you're going to make, you know, maybe some not really super logical choices for her because it becomes emotional. And I think it's okay to be on both sides of that. You know, I think it's okay to make those tough choices that to somebody who's not a farmer might look really cold and calculated, but it makes sense for what you're doing. And then I think it's okay if you're a hobby farmer and you get attached to them, or you have a boy that you just love and you keep them as a pet because what the heck, you know, you can. And I think it's okay to be on either side of that. Just be true to yourself and know what that is. Like, what is your line and what is your plan?
yeah. Well, and Jenna and I have mentioned a few times, you know, because even though we want to get to a point where, you know, farming is our full-time thing, and, you know, to us, you know, you're not going to become really attached. You know, if you have 150, 200 sheep, you're not going to become really attached with all of them. But you know what? Jenna and I got into this also because we love animals. You know, we love surrounding ourselves with the animals every day. So regardless of if you have, you know, 20 or if you have 200, you're still going to have some that are, you know, like family to you. And like you said, I think it's good to be on both sides of it because, you know, that's just, I mean, that's part of farming.
Yeah, it is.
We're all humans and we all have emotions. So there's going to be some of those personalities that you're just like, I can't.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, like
your purpose for going into it too. Like you guys are going into it for meat. So like you guys turning it into meat is not that weird of a process for you guys because that's what you went into it for.
Exactly.
You know, Kate, you got into it because you guys were showing them. So they were pets. And that's kind of how you got into it. And I also think it's different with the milking too. Like, I don't know, Jen and Jordan, if you're planning to do any milking yourselves. But there is a little bit more of that personal connection because you're out there with them every day, multiple times a day, handling them, patting them. And so there is a little bit more of that physical connection versus if you just had a flock out in the field and yeah, you can see them and you go and you do shots, you take care of them, but there's not that like every day, like let's go, you know, handle them and love on them and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's times too where, you know, for instance, like we don't need a lot of boys. So the wethers, I mean, if you know, you can keep a few for bucks or sell a few for bucks, but the castrated males, we do have a 4-H program that we have for those boys. So most of the time I can find good 4-H homes for them. But there are times where I know I have a few boys that I'm not sure what where they're going to end up. They may end up as meat, and I'm probably going to make an effort not to get quite as attached to them. You know, I'm going to still give them a good life and treat them humanely, but I'm probably not going to spend as much time bonding with them because it'll make it easier if we do have to make that choice.
So because we talked about bottle babies a little bit, how many bottle babies have you guys had in your experiences?
So we only had The one. Unfortunately, the one brother had died just out of nowhere the week after it was born. So that one was the second bottle baby, but the main one we bottle fed for about 2 months.
Yeah,
And
so
it was,
I imagine with sheep, bottle babies is not intentional.
no.
No.
Yeah, and with goats, there's, especially with dairy goats, show goats, 4-H goats, there are different schools of thoughts of how you want to raise the kids, and many dairy goat breeders specifically intentionally bottle raise all their babies. And part of that is from a behavioral standpoint, they're much, much easier for us to handle. They're much, much friendlier. And so that would be one reason to bottle raise babies. And then there's also the milk issue. If you're selling milk and you can bottle raise babies on commercial cow milk and then sell your goat milk for 3 times as much, it's a lot more of a good economic decision to do that. And then there's times where we have to bottle raise because of some issue where either a mother rejected a baby or the mother didn't have milk. I mean, I've had a couple of those kid before they have freshened, and now you're going to have to bottle feed those babies. And if you start out bottle feeding them, they're never going to go to nursing. And then sometimes we're doing a combination where we're letting them be dam raised for the first few weeks, and then we might bottle feed them part-time to have that bonding and the behavioral thing. So we have a lot of bottle babies, and sometimes we mean to, and sometimes it just happens because we had to. But it's a little different than I think it is with sheep. A lot of times it's completely intentional.
I think a lot of times with the bottle babies, like you said, how you want, for milking your goats, they become more personable when you're bottle feeding them. I think any animal would become attached to you when you're bottle feeding it. I mean, we had our little lamb Kippa that we bottle fed him for a couple months, and even when you came into the barn without a bottle, he was all over you because he knew that that's where his food came from, and they just become the sweetest, friendliest animals when they have that attachment to you.
Exactly. Yeah, we always say you can tell the bottle babies because they come running up to the fence,
Yeah,
and the dam raised babies run away from you when you come in. And so and I like that hybrid model because sometimes those bottle babies are darned obnoxious. Like you cannot walk through the pen; they're jumping all over you. And where the dam raised ones, sometimes you can't catch. And so I often do this kind of hybrid thing where I want them dam raised because I don't want them to be so friendly that I can't even get into the gate. But I'll bottle feed them a little bit to get them bonded to me enough that I can handle them and catch them and they're friendly. And that actually is the sweet spot. That's what I prefer.
Yeah, we started our flock with all bottle babies because we got them from a dairy, and the sheep are really my thing, but my husband's had to come help, and now they follow him more than they would follow me, and it drives him crazy. Like, why are they always following me? I'm trying to do work out in the field, and he's like, and they're just all around me, and I'm like, they just like you.
Yeah, you're mom.
Yeah.
So you talked about when moms don't freshen. Does that mean that they won't, or do you just pump like you would, like you milk yourself and then you just wait till it comes down?
Yeah, sometimes it's just a matter of timing, that if the kids come early or if it's a first freshener, but I've even seen it happen with a doe that, had milk 3 years in a row. And then this year it's just late coming in. So you're going to help it come in by just going through the motions and milking them. So even if you're just getting them up, milking them twice a day and you're getting 2 squirts, that's going to help stimulate things. Also, just massaging the udder really helps to stimulate the hormones to get that milk production going. So sometimes it's just like a day or 2, but I've seen it be a week or 10 days before that milk really started coming in. And then usually it will. I mean, as long as you are keeping stimulating it during that time. And so it's unusual. I mean, most of the time they're going to have their milk in by the time the kids hit the ground, but, or at least the colostrum, the milk doesn't come in for a couple more days after that.
So, if you pull the baby and it takes a day or two, can you put the baby back on, or is it like once you pull it, it's a bottle baby from then on?
Yeah, I have found none of my, really, if I've done the bottle feeding right from the very beginning, typically they're not then going to nurse. But if I just give them a little bit of the bottle and then I encourage them to nurse within that first day, then usually they'll do both, you know. I mean, it's kind of like when what?
Even when nothing's coming out?
Yeah, because even putting that baby on to help stimulate, I mean, if you think about that, baby trying to nurse is the same as me trying to milk the dough. And so, but they're going to give up pretty early on if nothing is coming out. So sometimes it's, you know, in that case where the dough doesn't have milk, and you're having to bottle feed, that's probably going to be longer than just a few hours. And probably that kid is never going to nurse. You've now bottle fed it. It's a little like human babies. You know how they talk about nipple confusion with human babies, and a lot of new mothers that want to nurse don't want anybody giving that baby a bottle or a pacifier or anything because they risk them not nursing. And that will happen sometimes with babies too. But just like human babies, you'll have some that'll nurse, bottle feed, go back and forth, happy, whatever. And then you have some, it's like one or the other, but I'm not doing both. And then you have some babies that you can't get on a bottle to save your life. They will not take it. They just clamp down those teeth and they're like, no way, I'm never taking this bottle. I am only nursing. They have their personalities.
Yeah. So those are all the questions I have. Do you guys have anything from your experience that you guys want to share before we wrap this up? Just any other things that I may not have covered?
One thing I would add, I think Jen was talking about the selenium deficiency that you have. We've noticed more in the last few years. I've just become, I guess, more aware of thiamine deficiencies being an issue. We've had a few, I call them floppy babies. You know, they just come out and they just don't seem to have any muscle tone, and they're just not energetic. And I've even had that happen with a doe here and there. And thiamine is really inexpensive. It's super, you don't need a prescription. Just having thiamine on hand, you can turn around a kid that looks like it's gonna die pretty easily with thiamine. It won't hurt anything. So it's a great thing to have in your toolbox. And I've only really recently started really realizing how effective it is. For, you know, just a floppy, sleepy, listless kid, sometimes just that little thiamine injection, and boy, they're just up and like a new creature. So that's something I would add to your toolkit.
Do you know if that's something that you can use with sheep as well?
I don't actually know. I would think so, but I don't actually know. I mean, the only thing I really know is the copper thing with sheep, that you can't have copper, but I would think that you probably can, but I wouldn't know for sure.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's that point?
I was just saying it might just be a different in dose, like depending on the weight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's different. It is dosed by weight. And then in addition to that, in my toolkit over the years, just having other things that would be a stimulant. So a little corn syrup or molasses, even coffee, believe it or not. For that kid that's just weak and not really sucking, you know, even just putting some on their gums, a little coffee, a little molasses, a little corn syrup, you know, or giving a thiamine injection. Or we have a product called NutriDrench. Do you guys use that with sheep? NutriDrench is just a really high vitamin and sugar supplement that you can just get at any feed store. And some people will just routinely give that both to the doe and the kid as a just little nutritional supplement. So it's another thing that will just help kind of wake them up. And you know, some of that is if you've had a really tough delivery, everybody's tired, and you know, if a baby, I mean, they're just little things, and if they come out and they're exhausted and then they won't nurse because they're just exhausted, some kind of stimulant like that is really helpful to have in your toolkit as well as your kidding kit.
Yeah, we've done that. We've done the corn syrup and water thing because you're just trying to get them some electrolytes to, you know, get them perked up again and get them you know, back to normal.
Corn
Yeah.
syrup
Did I say cornstarch?
I think you might have said
Oh.
corn.
Yeah, yeah. And then the only other thing I would say is when you talked about hypothermia, is knowing how to warm up a kid if it gets too cold. Because if they're too cold, you can't get nutrients in them. I mean, they won't suck and you can't absorb anything. You got to warm them first. So having a warming box set up is really good. You can do that yourself with just a plastic box and a hairdryer. You know,
Yep.
get them in the warming box. And then you can also do, I like to call it the hot tub approach. And you don't want to get the baby wet, but what you can do is take a really warm bucket of water and put that baby actually in a plastic bag. I mean, not their head, obviously, but their body. And then put that body into the warm bath. And that'll get them warm really quickly. And those two things will be much more effective than just trying to warm them on, you know, holding them by your skin. Because if you find a hypothermic baby, forget about nutrition until you get it warm. So those are a couple additional things I would just say be prepared with.
I
Is
think
Diamond a shot then? Because you mentioned is
Yeah.
that a
It's
shot
an
like,
injection.
like you give
Sub-Q. Yeah, subcutaneous shot. Yeah, so having a little, you know, little needles. We always keep 2 size needles, kids and does. And then if you can have a smaller syringe, because the dosage is really small for a kid, like, you know, you might be giving them 0.6 ml. And if you only have a 4 ml, you know, or 6 ml syringe, it can be a little hard to figure out how to get that small of a dosage.
Yeah.
one thing I would add in is just because this was our first lambing experience this last spring, we were so nervous about it because we didn't know what to expect. So basically, you just kind of have to go through it and realize that nature will take its course. Like, you're there to assist, but for the most part, that you should be able to do it on her own. But in the case that she can't, have your mentor or a vet on hand to help you out if you need it. And just try to stay confident that you're going to be able to help her if you need to. Because if you're stressed out, and like him and I, we've done everything together, and if we're stressing each other out, it's not going to go well. We just have to stay calm, stay patient, and just know it's going to be okay, and we'll have help on hand if we need it.
Patience is the biggest thing I found, and you know what? That's even a good. It's helped us out a lot in our marriage. Just even the patience that farming takes. You know, no matter what you're doing. You know, these animals, they don't know what you want them to do. They don't listen to you. So you just kind of have to be patient and let everything just go with the flow, take it one step at a time. And like Jenna said, you know, if you're stressed out, you're just going to stress them out. So.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate too, I know, Jenna, you've said a couple times about having a mentor, and definitely when you're new at this, don't go it alone. You know, do research. You know, the internet is great for research and things like this are good, but have somebody you can call because it's really, even just from the calming standpoint, you know, even when I've done this a lot, that difficult kidding I had with all the multiple legs coming out, I mean, that was my 10th year of kidding, but I was alone and I could not reach anybody, but I finally reached a friend who also has a lot of experience, and she just talked me through it. You know, she calmed me down and talked me through it. And so I think that's good too. And then also, I think, Jenna, you said earlier, you'll make mistakes or you'll have some things go wrong and you'll learn from them. And so, you know, trying not to beat yourself up for the coulda, woulda, shoulda, you know, just try to learn from that and then do it better the next time, or have a new trick you've learned because of something that didn't go right. And that's part of it too. Like, you're in this for the long haul, hopefully. And so you have to be somewhat resilient, even just emotionally, when things don't go right, that maybe you could have prevented something, but you're doing the best you can do. So be gentle with yourself too.
Oh yeah, you can't beat yourself up about stuff. You know, we've had that a few times, especially with probably the first, I'd say the first 2 or 3 lambs that we had die. Yeah, you kind of just gotta, you know, be like a duck and let it roll off your back, because it's pretty easy to get down on yourself. And we've even had some friends that they're like, oh, like, you know, after these lambs die, I can't believe that you guys, still want to keep having sheep. And it's like, yeah, well, you haven't realized how rewarding it can be when, you have a successful lambing season and all your lambs survive and grow up to be, healthy, happy sheep. It's really, there's no better feeling than the success, than when you have success on the farm.
Yeah, and especially when you have success because you learned something from a past failure. I mean, I had that happen this year. I had a kid, I didn't intervene soon enough, and he died. And then the exact same scenario happened the next week with a friend's kid, and I got in there and pulled those babies out, and they lived.
Yeah.
So it was something I felt really bad the week before, but then I'm like, well, I learned all these signs, like we're not waiting, we're going in and pulling those babies now. So then you feel even better. You're like, okay, I learned from that mistake and we saved 2 kids. So
I think that's pretty common for farming in general, is that a lot of times the only way you learn is when you do something wrong. And unfortunately, when you have livestock and animals, the wrong ends up being things don't go the way you want them to, and there's death. But like you guys were saying, that you learn and you pick up these little tricks, and then you can pass that knowledge on to others so that they know what to do and maybe don't make the mistakes that you guys did.
yeah, and I would also my final thought is, like, sometimes you do everything right and you still lose an animal. I mean, that's life, folks. I mean, there's just no guarantees, and there's lots of reasons why death happens. And so it isn't always some mistake. It's sometimes just what was meant to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for joining me with this talk. If you guys want to talk to the audience a little bit, just tell them where they can follow you if they want to follow your journey. Kate, I know you have classes, so definitely talk to them about that and where they can find that. But yeah, just share a little bit about kind of how they can find you and reach you and just follow your journeys.
Yeah, so the best way to find me is on my website. It's called theartofcheese.com. My farm is briargatefarm.com. And so you can look at either of those that really take you to the same place. So we are teaching, in fact, I have a cheese making class in an hour and a half here to go to. I'm teaching virtually right now because we can't teach in person. But lots and lots of cheese making classes. And then I also do some non-cheese making classes like soaps and lotions and that type of thing. And then we also do sell Nubian dairy goats that are show quality too. So we take reservations for spring kids as well. And then I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. So it's The Art of Cheese. Longmont is the name of the Instagram channel, and it's just Art of Cheese on Facebook.
We're gonna go follow you now. Now that we know where to find you. We're just on Instagram. It's at From the Dirt. We just kind of started our Instagram account right from when we first purchased our first sheep until now. So it's kind of just documenting the trials and tribulations that we've had throughout all of this. And we just hope that through that Instagram account that we can hopefully spare someone else the heartbreak that we've experienced along the way, or else just make things a little bit easier for them through things that we've learned the hard way, I guess.
Yeah, and Delaney, thank you so much for having us on and having us be a part of this. Like I said at the very start, we're constantly learning. Kate, I'm sure even you say, after 15,
Oh yeah, still
15,
learning.
you're always learning. You're never going to be perfect at it. And so it's awesome when we can have things like this and talk to other experienced farmers and, pick up some hot tips here and there about, do's and don'ts of farming, because, when you first start out, especially if you don't come from a farming background, a lot of it can be so overwhelming. And so like, us and Kate have both said mentors are a huge thing. If you have somebody you can phone up at 1:30 in the morning when you've got a problem, birth happening, that kind of stuff is invaluable. You can't, you can't talk to the importance of that enough. So all of this stuff, any any type of research you can do, any platform that you can seek advice and information on is just great.
Well, and that's why I started this, is that I saw that there was a lack of like personal experience. You know, you get all the books and here's all how it's supposed to look and how it's supposed to go, and then you get on a real farm and you're like, this is not what the books say. The animals are not following what the book is saying.
Yeah, they didn't read that book
They didn't
somehow,
read
you
this
know?
book. Like what and so I was just thinking it was just really important to get like people who just got into it, because I myself am I'm a city girl, born and raised. I rode horses, but other than that, I was like, I don't know anything about sheep or any of this stuff before we got into it. And there's still a whole lot that I don't know. And I was like, there's so many people out there, especially with the COVID and people trying to produce their own food now, that like want to get into it, but just don't have the resources, especially now that like a lot of the state stuff is closed.
Yeah.
Like we had a small ruminant course that was supposed to happen like I think in March, and that didn't happen. So there's a lot of, I think, holes there now, especially because you can't actually go to any classes. So I just appreciate you guys giving me the time and just coming along and sharing all your experiences. I just really think the audience is going to absorb a lot. I know like I have absorbed, I think this is my 4th or 5th one, and I'm like, there's so many little tricks. I'm like, I have to like have a notebook and write all the little tricks.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you. And nice to meet you, Jordan
Nice
and Jenna.
to meet you.